I'm going to talk a bit about the business of blockchain and how industry organizations and how you can use industry organizations and associations to help you figure out what you use to help monetize what you're going to create, and how much do you give up or don't give up in your intellectual property assets, because it's been a real challenge here in the world of blockchain, because many of the folks who started their blockchain business, they're a lot of them are millennials. They don't have a serious business experience dealing with intellectual property and the challenges of protecting their own assets, but they're passionate about open source. And open source in their mind means decentralization, not being able to share what they have, and using open source as a way to decentralize the business opportunities for the many, as opposed to what we've seen currently going on. So it sort of clouds the issue about, okay, how do you manage open source, and how does a standards org, which is called open standards, function, and then what do you do about leveraging organizations to help you be successful? And that's really what I'm going to talk about. Plus, I'm going to talk about the token economy and some aspects that what we're doing in collaboration with pretty much the entire ecosystem of folks who are involved in the world of blockchain, and that is not tied to Ethereum. I'll share with you what we're looking to do. It's even more global, because that's the way we can build a bigger market opportunity. So I just start out, so I'm just going to talk to you about, I can see that you can't, but in any event, I start out with some slides about the web. And I grew up in the world of the internet when that first started, and Tim Berners-Lee, who, as you know, wrote HTML and all kinds of stuff to help proliferate the internet. But the vision of the internet, even though back in the olden days, is really similar to the vision of what folks want to see in blockchain, except it was not publicized the same way. When I think about it, there wasn't this argument that, okay, well, we need something decentralized, privacy and trust. All that stuff just came about because that's just seemed like the way to go. In this world today, it's far more clear that there's a mission out there to fix the things that they felt were broken. So my first slide is talking about that, and then the next one is who would have predicted, and the same thing is going to happen in blockchain. No one could figure out what is going to really work in the world of the internet. That's going to be massive. In fact, I was a product marketing manager in the entertainment game software business when I first started, and I would sell to all the retailers, and it was all about brick and mortar. And I can tell you, because I'd call on them, they totally believed, including Blockbuster, I used to call on them, and they all felt, what the heck, nothing's going to ever happen. You're shaking your head. I can tell you, they would have bet they bet their whole company that nothing's going to happen with the internet and the business of the internet. But of course, we know what happened. So the bottom line, I'm just pointing out, the good of the internet far outweighs the bad that's happened on the internet, even though in today's world, we're all looking at the things we can fix that are bad, and that's, again, one of the benefits of what blockchain is bringing. And so, next slide. Blockchain talks about fulfilling some of these promises. And it's great. And so we're all working toward doing that, decentralization, building more privacy and trust, as you know. And so this is the chance to actually use some new technology, like the previous discussion. Using some new technology to help accomplish those objectives is how the folks are, whether they realize it or not, it's not this name blockchain, it's really what blockchain can do to help them accomplish that. And the good part about what I say about blockchain, why I'm involved in, it serves two parallel tracks. One is enterprise, which is going to move the ecosystem forward. The other, which I think is amazingly important, is social impact, which we just heard a talk before. They don't run side by side where they're synergistic necessarily. And I can tell you some of the solutions, like on identity and tied to social impact, are completely different than identity for, let's say, a telecom or other company wanting to make something work. And so it'll be interesting to see, and we're talking about how this will all play out. I'd love to see it play out so it works for both. And so that's what our organization, in my role, and what I'd like to help contribute toward, have happen. But that's going on right now. But the opportunity to leverage that is there for us. So what's happened? And what I'll do is, if they can get this working, one or two things. If you just I'll give you my email, and where you can get the slide deck, because I think this is a good deck. It has a lot of slides in it that will show you the adoption curves, et cetera, and what I'm talking about. So we have a sluggish adoption, and lots of problems going on that you're seeing in pretty much everything that's going on in the world of blockchain. This year, all the events have less people, including all the events I've gone to. It's not just one, it's just how it's playing out. There's less people than last year. And then, and our org there are a lot of members who didn't pay in the first place to join when they said they would, or just they're no longer members because they realize this is the wrong venue for them, or they started out and it's just not going to work out. So the bottom line, we're filtering out this year, and it's going to continue to filter out the folks who should be in and the folks who shouldn't. So it's not my point being, it's not a bad thing that we go through these curves. It's just a normal evolution path that I've experienced in countless other ecosystems and industries. We're experiencing the same, but it gets worse because here we have to try to figure out how you rip out legacy infrastructure or not rip it out. It's disruptive. Also, you have, which I've never seen before, it's far worse than the dot-com demise that I lived through. And I was at a dot-com where they just told us, spend all your money. We didn't get the money that easily, but they told us to spend it. But this time, the money came easier, and who knows where it went. So it's actually worse. So all these things have caused a lot of problems to increase the, let's say, the trust in what's supposedly trustless environment, which is blockchain. So keys to success for moving it forward, and this is partly why I think we're important, what goes on in industry orgs. You need governance, and you need stewardship. Governance, rules of how you have oversight of the entity. And unfortunately, from the notion of, I thought you meant, unfortunately, with the notion of a lot of folks from who have this view of decentralization, they don't like governance, or they don't want to have big companies involved. But actually, that you have to have it. Even if you look at the ERC-20 and 721 tokens, if you didn't have any kind of standard or some form of rules, we wouldn't even have anything. So you have to have that. And then, and I'm going to talk a little more about standards, but it all leads toward interoperability and regulatory approval, which is still a ways to go. My next slide is a timeline to global adoption. So I put together this timeline, and basically it talks about how many years it typically takes for innovation to take off. And I've experienced it from digital cameras to 8-tracks to DVDs, CDs. It's all the same. And I spent 12 years at Intel launching a 4G business at Intel. And it took 12 years to get, it's called LTE, you've seen your phones. But when I first started, I actually made the chip at Intel that we made the 4G chip. It's 10, 15 years. And now 5G is coming out, same thing. It's not really 5G, what's on my Samsung phone. Side note, E stands for evolution path. LTE stands for evolution because they were embarrassed to tell their investors, like at Vodafone, that they failed in 3G. So they call it LT evolution so they can feel like they might have a story to tell the investment community. That is the truth, how it happened. So you have an introduction into technology, you have a proof of concepts, and then you have folks try to make products. Some of you guys are working on that. I know you are, and many companies when they start, and a lot of the guys who start these things or gals are technologists, or they don't have a business side of it, and they feel they have to protect their intellectual property and not give up stuff. That's not necessarily the best strategy, by the way. You have to know how much you give up, and I mean, you just mentioned it. You have to know how much you have to give up and still keep your secret sauce. And talk to folks who are really good in business development and the pluses and minuses to do that, because you could be making a mistake and shooting yourself in the foot, and then the big players come in, because the big players will, and you're out. And the reason why is because the company felt, oh, I'm not going to share anything. And I can tell you, I've seen this countless times. So you have to be really careful about, and get some help, talk to somebody who can help you, how much you should contribute to an entity that's an industry association or an org. Because that's your ticket for getting the big companies to buy into your success. Because most of the companies who launch blockchain, there's so many of them, they're very small. And the ones who are small typically will partner with the big companies, like we heard, Deloitte, Accenture, whomever. It's a good idea. And so then it percolates, and we saw this happen in the world of blockchain last year. There's a lot of buzz, and my slide has little bees buzzing around on it. So I really hope you get to see it. We took time putting this together. So the bees are buzzing last year. And what happened is that you got the attention of the big companies where they weren't interested in before. And so now you're seeing some proof of concepts. This year you're going to see production deployments, but it's still going to be slow. So how do you keep your money and survive is the challenge. And we're already seeing a lot of companies running out of money. And so the challenge is it's going to still take longer to get out there. And then these big companies see what's going on, and they go, I need a standards org. And in my world, it's IEEE, my old world, ETSI, European Technology Standards Institute, ITU. These are real standards orgs, which we don't have in blockchain. The closest you have is the Ethereum Foundation and Hyperledger, which is not a standards org, they're open source. And so in order to deliver the comfort for these big companies to buy into it, you have to have an association and a standards org. And you need both. The standards org starts, but they're technologists. They don't write the feature sets that make it work for business. Then you form an association like the EEA, and there could be others. But you form an association, and our job is to figure out, we bring the members in from companies large and small. Everybody should get the same vote, which they do. And then they formulate what makes sense. And if without having that, you can't get to the next level, and which is how do you get to global adoption? And I'm going to talk a little more about what's the most important factor to make that happen is certification. So my next slide is the hype cycle. For the Gartner hype cycle, we're in the trough of disillusionment, and everybody knows that. But I hear like some of the cryptocurrencies gone up again. How much? Minutes left? All right, I'm fast forwarding then. All right. So the most important factor is certification, and in order to get to certification, you have to have a standards org. So now I'm going to fast forward to a separate topic. The big buzz are tokens. And so in our organization, we decided to host an initiative that is neutral to the technology. It is not tied to Ethereum. It's tied to a universal language to define a token. And we felt if we do that, Ethereum obviously is the primary token, but they should benefit the most. So we formed an initiative, and we announced it publicly about 2 weeks ago. And what we did is we went and approached all the companies in the ecosystem, from IBM to R3 to Digital Asset to Consensus, and we formed an initiative, and it's separate from the EA, and anyone can join. And the goal is to create a universal language for a token, and it's not tied to technology. And so we're having some major meetings. We're having a webinar a week from this Thursday, and here's Jessie. She can give you a link. You can get a download, and the leader of this is Microsoft. They donated the initial versions of this taxonomy, and instead of having what you're experiencing where you have all these folks arguing, fighting about which client is better, we have an opportunity to tokenize the whole global economy in a positive way. And I can tell you all these companies I mentioned have joined, and they're actively working together, and we host it. All we're doing is hosting the GitHubs, because they're not cheap since Microsoft bought them, $9 a person. So it's not Microsoft's fault. I'm just joking around. But our GitHub, anybody who wants to join. So if you guys are interested and you're involved in the token side, we have an amazing initiative that we're launching. There's a webinar a week from this Thursday, and it's all about how to define tokens in a way that, and you probably want the deck because it covers all that, where based on whether it's fungible, non-fungible, hybrid versions, what are the properties and behaviors of the token, whether it's transferable, whether you can burn the token or mint the token. Burn means if it was a barrel of oil, now converted to gas, so that has to be burnt, okay? So we have a formulation of a taxonomy, which is way cool, that is going to enable it to work even for like loyalty programs, you name it. And whoever wants to join and figures out what they want to do for your own initiative, you can then take the taxonomy and create your own version of the extending it to define your tokens. So I have a fair amount more on it, but since my time has run out, what's the best way? Are you guys interested in seeing the deck? Or you can give your card right here. We can collect it. If you give us your card, we'll make sure you get it. And then if you have any questions, give us a call. And if you're interested in this taxonomy initiative, we have some literature on it at our booth. And again, you don't have to join the EA to be involved in it, because we want to make this, we're taking the high ground on this. We want to make sure we can do the best we can to globalize tokens. So what'd you think of the slides? Were they really good? The bees were great.
For Ron, who did a great job.